Meeting of the Holyoke Public Schools is called to order at 6:03 p.m. Ms. LaFawn, roll call.
Mayor Morse.
Present.
Hey,
Present.
Present.
no.
Present.
Here. Burke.
Here.
Donald Sims. Mr. Snell. Collmore. Here. Mr. Cushing.
Present.
Rommel.
Here.
And Mr. Wyatt.
Present.
All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. LaFawn, are any public speakers? No one signed up? All righty. So, moving along. Student showcase is what we're starting with.
Yeah, so we're going to start with the student showcase, and unfortunately, one of our students that we were showcasing, Tanaj Walter, had a family emergency this afternoon and had to cancel. But I'm very pleased that Molly O'Donnell is with us today, and I am very grateful that some of her teachers are here. Miss Finn, Miss Wall are here, and the principal of STEM school, Ms. DeMars, is also here, so I want to thank them. I had the opportunity to go to the Enchanted Circle event about 2 weeks ago now. Everything sort of blurs together. But I was so moved by our two performers from STEM that performed around about plastic. And one was a beautiful poem and one was a beautiful rap. I'm not sure if that's the right descriptor, but it was a very talented rap. And I would like him to come at another time to present his rap. But we would love for the team from STEM to come up to share Molly's beautiful poem with the rest of the school committee. Welcome.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Wall. I teach 6th grade science at Holyoke STEM Academy. And this year we had the awesome opportunity to collaborate with Smith College as well as Enchanted Circle Theater. The kids got a really immersive experience, got to travel to Smith College and see plastic entanglements at the art museum. And from doing so, they created their own public service announcements, which they got to perform at Smith College and at the Sparks event. So Molly, who's one of our 6th graders, created her own public service announcement that she would like to share with you today.
Hello, my name is Molly O'Donnell and I'm a 6th grader at Holyoke STEM Academy. As part of our science unit, we viewed more than 40 pieces at Smith College Museum of Art's Plastic Entanglement. These pieces inspired my writing. My piece is called, "Is a Straw Really Worth a Life?" Why do we choose single-use plastic over the lives of sea turtles, whales, dolphins? We put things that are convenient for us over the lives of animals. There are 10 million pounds of plastic in the ocean. An estimated 1 million marine animals are harmed by this plastic. Not only are we harming sea animals, but we are harming ourselves. With each piece of plastic, we are digging our own graves. Although people don't want to admit it, there is a change happening, an undeniable change, not only in temperature, but the way we live. We are so willing to compromise our ability to eat, drink, and overall live for convenience. But you have the choice to change. Will you make the right choice? Will you run with it or crash and burn? If only you knew our table salts contain microplastics. When you think of plastic, what do you think of? Clothing? Computers? Probably not. Gum? Glitter? Tea bags? No. Isn't it crazy the amount of things that are plastic and we use them without giving it a second thought? Have you ever questioned the price of plastic? In the USA alone, we spend $5 million on straws. Yes, straws alone. Every single day. A simple reusable straw costs $7.98. Even I am guilty of using plastic. This project has opened my eyes and my heart to the thought that I am harming innocent creatures. Would you feed your dog or cat a plastic bag? I know, I would never. Animals don't know better. It's our job to protect them. It took millions of years to evolve to where we are today, and by continuing to use single-use plastic, we are going to unravel all that development in a matter of years. I speak for the ones who can't. The turtles, the dolphins, the whales, the birds, the fish, and the jellyfish. We need to take off our blindfolds and open our eyes to the horrible things we are doing to animals, ourselves as well as others, and the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I kind of feel bad because I got a straw here. She started, no, this is styrofoam. Shh. Anybody have any comments? Thank you so much.
We have a
I do, Mr. Burks.
What types of pictures or photos did they show you when you went to Smith Academy? What'd you see when you went there?
That were made out of plastic, side of them. Stars. And they had plastic from like all this plastic found on like a lot of plastic and it instead of
Did you have so after you saw the exhibit, did you come back and do more research on the topic and then write what you wrote? Yeah, explain it. What'd you do?
So I looked up the amount of straws, okay, and then cost of each straw, and calculated the amount of money that we're spending. $5 million. Got it. Lot of straw. Really, that much money spent.
Thought you did a great job. I thought it was incredibly informative and beautifully spoken, by the way. You did a great job, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Great. Mayor Morse?
Well, thank you, Molly, for your presentation and for your passion on this issue. I know you focused on single-use plastic straws, and I'm just wondering if you did some research on single-use plastic bags.
Plastic bags are not only harming dogs, like start like if it's on the street, they'll start like going towards the plastic to go bite it, and a lot of people I've noticed that, and like a lot of animals are suffocating because they're getting stuck in the bags. It's really scary to think about.
Yeah, no, we'd love to have your voice. I know our Board of Health is going to be soon talking about a single-use plastic bag ban in the city, and I know the City Council has considered it here and there, and so to have a youth voice in particular go to those meetings and be an advocate for actual policy and here on the local level and how we can be an example for other communities, it would be great to have you there. So, yeah.
And Miss Tinsley Williams.
Thank you, Molly, for your report. You said that there's plastic in table salt.
Yeah.
Did you make a study? Is it in medication? Any plastics?
I'm not exactly sure. I just know that in a lot of our readings and a lot of stuff online and articles that we're advocating for bans against single-use plastic mention that because a lot of our salt comes from like sea salt, comes from like obviously seawater, and it's hard to clean out all the tiny bits of plastic because they're so small that it usually gets passed through as salt, and we end up eating it in our food, and like the fish have plastic in them.
And I use sea salt, so I probably won't anymore.
Yeah, 90% of table salt has plastic in it.
Thank you.
Mr. Cushane?
Molly, what did you think about Smith College, and what did you enjoy the visit, and what did your class get out of that visit?
We all kind of opened our eyes because every day we have fruit wrapped in plastic and sandwiches wrapped in plastic. And a lot of the kids stopped getting like the plastic utensils and would just kind of like get a cup and like eat it out of the cup instead of having a spoon and creating that much more plastic. And we all kind of like stopped for a moment and was like, wait, we're actually doing this. And a lot of kids have stopped, and it was like stopped and thought like, this is not right. And a lot of them are now telling their parents like, don't grab those plastic bags, bring your own.
Right. And what about the visit to did you enjoy you visited the campus?
Yeah.
Did it turn you and your classmates on to thinking about college at all, or what was that
Yeah.
experience like?
We've definitely thought about, we were like, wow, this campus is pretty cool and it's like a nice place to study. We saw some of the like science areas with like how they're studying plants and like how to reuse the plastic to help like plants grow. And we all kind of had fun like making our own using a plastic bottle. And it was really, really interesting.
That's good.
Mr. Sheehan?
Yeah. As with everyone else, I thought it was great, but I would also encourage you and your fellow students, and since you've been studying this and working with it, to engage even with our district food service providers to see what they can do. I don't know if you have, to try to talk with them to see what they can do to reduce some of the usage. I'm sure they can't reduce as much as we'd like, but I mean, I'm sure there's ways that you could work with them, and I would definitely encourage you to, as the mayor mentioned, reach out to his office, reach out to your city councilor to find out, especially with the single-use plastic bag ban. I think like Springfield just did it, and they're a much larger city than we are, and they're able to do that. So I would, if this is something you're passionate about and your classmates are, I think it would be a great project to carry from 6th to 7th grade as well. Because you're in 6th grade, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from 6th to 7th grade as well, because it really something that could really be better both cost-wise for our city, but also for the environment. So it really, I applaud you for doing that, and not only the poem, but the research and the work that you and your teachers have done with this.
Yeah.
I just want to say one thing. In a little bit, I'm going to present our budget for the upcoming year. We have a slide about what we hope our students are going to be when they graduate. And I'm looking down at the list and I'm checking off every one here: effective communicator, critical thinker, engaged and productive community member, and mindful individual. You check off every single one of those,
Thank you
and
very
you're only in
much.
6th grade.
Thank you.
I'm just the way that you answer people's questions, the poise, the confidence, and you getting up in front of everybody here. And I saw it with a much bigger group at the log cabin, with a room packed with people. There, I would have been hiding behind. I still am hiding behind the stage, but you went up there with such poise and confidence. So I really applaud you, and I applaud your parents who are here
Thank
with
you
you
so
today. So
much.
thank you for coming to the meeting.
Thank you.
Great, thank you again. And there's Dad bringing back the microphone, I take it?
Oh, he's going to do the rap, actually.
So moving on to communications and reports, student reports. Who's going first? We're going to go with Holyoke High School Dean Campus.
I wanted to say that, seniors have been, for the past month, they have been doing a countdown to graduation day. They're really eager to start a new chapter in their lives and just move on to college, military, and we want to thank you for all the opportunities you have given us. Also, for my campus, we have the mentoring program. Right now, we have seniors mentoring freshmen for the freshmen to get like a glimpse of how high school is going to be for the next couple years, and we want to make that constant. We don't want it to stop, and we want to make sure that everybody has someone they could look after, and even after outside of school, somebody they could go to if they're having trouble or anything like that. And that's about it. But personally, I want to thank you guys for all the opportunities you have given me, and also the kids around Holyoke Public Schools.
Well, we thank you. You're not going anywhere, right? Not yet. You still have next month.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. You can come back. So really quick, just you said about the mentoring that you don't want it to stop, you want it to continue. How are we getting the juniors involved as of now, so they kind of know how to do the same type of mentoring with the incoming ninth graders?
Alan Gates from our campus is already in the process of making sure the students attain a certain standard. That way they can be able to become mentors to all the upcoming freshmen. And we also have even the underclassmen mentoring the eighth graders from the STEM Academy. So it builds up like the leadership background that we want our Dean campus students to have eventually.
Great, thank you. Your turn.
Well, just jumping off of what Mariani said, Mariani, sorry. Just everybody's really eager up on the North Campus to graduate. We're all counting down to these 13 days. This is our finals week, so everybody's just been coming in, getting ready for their finals, making sure that all of their grades and all the work that we're missing were all turned in like by these days. But yeah, it's just overall excitement for the senior class. So yeah, and also thank you for giving us both the opportunity for our voices to be heard and to be the representatives for our respective campuses.
Well, congratulations to both of you, and we're thankful for having you here with us. Mr. Sheehan?
Yeah, I know that sometimes you have to run out if we run late. So there's something I wanted to point out. First of all, I think you two have been outstanding student reps. It's been many years since we've had two such dedicated people to the committee. So thank you so much. But I'm just going to single out something that Mariani brought up maybe 6-8 months ago. Can't find it in the budget right now, but we had a large discussion about how students at the Dean campus were having challenges doing dual enrollment, different programs like that because of transportation. I think that's something that you brought up pretty passionately, that it's hard to find that. Well, I think because of some of those words, you got Dr. Zreich and you got Mr. Soto and other people thinking that that is something, one of the goals built into the budget, and to have additional transportation, have vans, whatever it takes, to be able to provide that for students. So when you're talking to friends or talking to people who may want to fill your roles next year, whatever it may be, make sure that your classmates know that things that both of you say and do lead to actionable items, and that people listen to the students and what they're saying, because both of you should be proud of yourselves for what you do. But when I saw that printed on the slides, I immediately thought of you, because you talked about some of the issues with transportation from Dean for those other opportunities. So thank you for doing that, and I hope that you always remember us here.
Do you mind just talking a little bit about what we did at the advisory group, the work that we finished, the teacher qualities document, so that the committee knows the final project of the year for that group?
In Dr. Schrei's equity team, we actually been up to what qualities we want our teachers to have, what environment we want our classrooms to have as well, and what racial background we want. And we came up with some really interesting facts. One, for example, for the racial part, Holyoke is mostly Puerto Rican populated, but we also came up with the idea that we also want other teachers from different racial backgrounds, due to the fact that we are not so connected to the outside world, and most of us are not gonna stay at Holyoke for a couple years until we come back and see our home and see what we did. But also as well, we are encountering the problems we have in our community and how to fix them and that sort of thing in general.
Yeah, so they as Mariani was saying, they created a list of qualities that they are looking for in teachers that we could hand any teacher interviewing for a position in the Holyoke Public Schools, is what our students are looking for, what the way teachers communicate, their beliefs about students, and I can share that with the committee. And we shared it with we had 2 students share it with principals at our last principal meeting, and that will be shared with all new teachers to the school system.
Great. All right. So moving on to introduction of new principals.
All right, I would ask our two new leaders in the Holyoke Public Schools to come take a seat next to Miss LaFon, Mr. Sal Canada, and Miss Sasha Garcia Mayu. Did I get that right or almost right? Almost, okay. So I wanted to take a moment to welcome two Holyokers back home to where they belong. And I'm going to start with an alphabetical order. We're going to start with Mr. Kanata. I just want to introduce Mr. Kanata, who will be the new principal at STEM Academy for the upcoming school year. He's worked in many different jobs in education, mostly in special education and administration. And he comes to us from the Northampton Public Schools, where he was a very successful principal of Leeds Elementary School. And there was a beautiful article of what portrayed him as a rock star in Northampton. But most importantly, and I think he's excited, I'll let him speak, that he's raised his family in Holyoke. He was born in Holyoke, and he has children that have graduated from the Holyoke Public Schools, a son who's currently a junior, and thankfully he was able to be here in time. Well, not thankfully, but the game got rained out tonight, his son's game, and so he's able to be with us on time. But we're really thrilled to welcome Sal to the Holyoke Public Schools into STEM Academy, and I just want to give him a chance to say a few words and see if anybody has any questions for Sal.
All right, so thank you first for the introduction, and it's nice to be here. It's still sort of a surreal experience being a principal-elect, I suppose, in Holyoke. Like Dr. Zreich said, better part of my entire life has been tied into this city. I was a Holyoke Boys Club kid. I spent my Fridays at Mountain Park. I skied Mount Tom. And when my wife and I were ready to purchase a home, we bought in Holyoke, and we've been in here for a little over 23 years. My son is a current junior. My daughter graduated in 15 and had a successful experience at Holyoke High and graduated this past Saturday from Bentley University.
Congratulations.
So it's been a wonderful ride. I wish I had known I'd be like this, because I'm jealous of Molly was ready and prepared. But last week I had the opportunity, or about a week and a half ago, I had the opportunity to meet the STEM staff. And that was kind of off the cuff too. I walked in and there was a room full of people. And I just came in, I thought I was going to say meet and greet and say hi. And they had their questions out for me, and they let it go, but and it went very well. So I'm excited to build upon the successes of STEM. I'm excited to focus on STEM. You know, every kid in that school probably carries around a piece of technology. So let's really tie things together with STEM. And I also shared at that time that I was fired up. That's the word I used. I was fired up. I was fired up 6 years ago when I got my first principalship at Leeds, and it is bittersweet to leave, but I've never been so fired up to come here. I know that there are challenges. I understand that there are challenges. I know the work is going to be tough, but that's what excites me. I am ready for it, and I really think that if we can create a middle school experience that people can be envious of and that the city can be proud of, we can really build something great. So that's what's going to motivate me. That's what's going to drive me, and I cannot wait to get my feet wet, and I cannot wait to start. That's probably it. Just thanks for listening to me, and I'm sure you're going to ask me a few questions. You know, it's kind of, John is in here tonight, but I know 4 of you by name, which is kind of nice that I feel like I'm in a familiar place.
Anyone have anything?
They're much tougher than the Northampton School Committee. I'll just say that.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Be quite a debate.
Oh, Lord. Well, thank you and welcome.
Thanks.
Oh, I do have. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Collomar.
Along many years.
Yep.
Been together, but are you the great-grandson or the grandson of
The fighter?
the fighter?
The fighter was my grandfather.
Your grandfather? Right.
He was around long enough to show me how to throw a few. So remember, I was a boys club kid. So
Boys
I
Club,
got it.
right.
Yeah.
And his grandfather was the New England champion in boxing.
Awesome. Wow.
What we look for in our principals. We
Yeah.
look for,
Yeah. That's wrestling and boxing.
yeah, wrestling and
Yeah.
boxing. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have a quick
Miss Tensley Williams?
I just have a quick question for you. Do you know the ex-police officer, Joe Canada?
Yeah. Joe is my uncle and my godfather.
That's what I'm talking about. He asked me to sing for that group that he had, and I declined, but he's a great guy.
The Victorians or the memories?
The memories.
All right.
Wow, there's a lot of memories here.
Yeah.
That's great. Welcome.
I got another one over here.
Oh, we have another memory. No.
Oh, no.
Miss Brunel.
So I actually found out that you were coming here from a parent in Northampton, and she just had such high things to say about you. And, you know, it's kind of an unfortunate constant in Holyoke that we lose really great principals. So it's just so nice to be able to recruit somebody back to this city who's passionate about education, passionate about the city, and really excited to do their best. And you just come with so many high regards, and it's really
Thanks.
great to hear.
All right, I hope I live up to
Welcome.
them. Thank you.
So we shall introduce
Yes.
the next principal.
So now another trip down memory lane. I'm really thrilled to introduce Sasha Garcia. And how do I say it?
Mayu.
Mayu. Mayu. And I was, I don't know where she's been hiding, but when I met her, I was very quick to say this is somebody that is a perfect match for the Holyoke Public Schools. She is a lifelong, she did her whole academic career as a student in the Holyoke Public Schools, Lawrence, Highland, Kelly, Lynch, Holyoke High School, and graduated. We won't tell you what year she graduated from Holyoke High. But her whole academic career, she was a student in Chris Sajak's class the year after the book Among School Children was written. And I learned about a leader who has tremendous energy and spirit. Tried to get into Holyoke Public Schools a few times during the course of her career, and never worked out for whatever reason. And sadly, she did her work in the Springfield Public Schools as a teacher, as a different leaders, assistant principal, and for the last decade or so as an assistant principal at Renaissance School in Springfield. And we're just thrilled to welcome her back to Holyoke, to her roots. She has very fond memories of her time in the Holyoke Public Schools, and I'll let her talk a little bit about her experience. But she, like Sal, when she met the staff at Sullivan, it was I was very moved by her story and her reasons for wanting to come back to her hometown. So we welcome you back as well, and welcome to Sullivan School.
Thank you. I'm not sure what to say after all that. My name is Sasha Garcia Mayu, and I am Holyoke. So I haven't gotten a shirt. Wink, wink. Somebody can get it for me. So
We'll get you one,
congratulations, first of all, class of 2019. I currently oversee the seniors in my school, so I understand the excitement about finishing up. Thank you, Mayor Morris and Superintendent Zreich and school committee members for having Sal and I, Holyoke Krubies, back home. As Dr. Zreich mentioned, I was born and raised, actually I was born in Providence Hospital when it was a hospital. Yeah. So I was born and raised in Holyoke. I went to Holyoke High North Campus. And it was there that I was introduced to the Upward Bound program, which is a program that services, I think it's still around, that services first generation low economic families. And so I was one of the first to go to college in my family. And I had many opportunities as part of that program. And when I went off to Bates College, small private college in Maine. I actually graduated in May, June in Holyoke, and I was on a plane on my way to France in August of that year, where I did my first semester of college. I had no French because I took Spanish because, hey, easy A. And so there began my journey of wanting to work with people. And during my senior year in college, I was the class speaker, and I spoke about coming back to my community and giving back and kind of passing the torch to other young folks. As Dr. Zweig mentioned, I tried to come back many capacities. It just didn't work out, and so now is the right time. And I believe that. I spoke at Sullivan on May 9th, 2 days before my birthday. So that was a really packed week. And I was received with a warm welcome in person and via email. People were very open to the change and to me coming. And so I felt very welcomed. And I'm just trying to wrap things up where I am right now. So that I can start nice and strong here in Holyoke. My family lives here. My mom, my dad, my brother, my nieces, my cousins. And so, but I have been in Springfield for the past 20, I'll be going into my 24th year of education, believe it or not, in the fall. So that's it. I'm glad. Thank you for having
You sure you
me.
didn't plan any of that? That was great.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
planned all
thank
that?
you.
Yeah,
Thank you. I do love public speaking.
Amazing, great. Does anybody have anything?
She just answered it. She's coming in the fall, so that's September, right?
Well, no, July.
July 1st.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yep. And both Sal and Sacha will have they're working 5 days before the end of the school year, so they can see the schools in action, meet staff, meet families. They're going to have events with students as well prior to the end of the school year, so we can get them acclimated, which is hard because they're both employed by other districts right now. But we wanted to make sure they spend some time with us before the end of the school year as well, and they officially start at the beginning of July.
Great.
Other questions for Sacha?
Yep. Ms. Brunel?
Yeah, I would just like to say welcome. I'm sure you're excited to come back to Holyoke, and just like I said with the gentleman to your right, we're excited to bring Hoyokers back to this town who are passionate about educating. So welcome, and it's nice to see some diversity into our principal staff. So it's nice to have some more women on board.
Thank you. I did appreciate, what's your name again? I'm sorry? Mariani's comment about trying to encourage people of color who are in leadership roles to come to Holyoke, because it is, I remember maybe one teacher who was out of either a language, custodial staff, or cafeterial staff that was a teacher of mine, and some of you may know him, Mr. Sotolongo. He was a social studies teacher, but I don't remember anybody else. And so the other piece is, for me, my classrooms looked very different than me. I was in AP and honors classes, and I was one of three, perhaps. And so to diversify that and give opportunities to students to push themselves academically is super important as well.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Can't wait to work with you guys this fall. Then again, this summer, June 1st. July 1st. July 1st.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
Coming into our district to really help us move forward and meet the goals and close the gaps.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Next on the agenda is the Mental Health Task Force recommendations. Is that what we're moving with?
Yes, so I'd ask the members of the task force to join us. I don't know how many are coming up.
We have another chair right.
Yeah, we have another. Do you all want to come up, or?
You guys all fit. There's more chairs. Our student reps are going to come.
We're gonna move down. Yep.
Come over here with us.
Thank you, student reps.
So I'm just gonna, I'll just lead by saying this group has been one of the more powerful groups that I've been associated with in my time here in Holyoke, and this has been an internal group of staff that came together around mental health concerns for the young people of Holyoke. I want to. I'm just going to introduce Erica Boulware, who was the lead of who led this work from the fall, and then I'll let the others introduce themselves. But a very talented group of folks, and this is a small snapshot. And the charge was really to establish a set of recommendations. The one in your packet was incomplete. You now have the complete one in front of you as a separate document of their recommendations, and then behind the recommendations are it's staggered by year of when they would like to see each of these things completed in the Holyoke Public Schools. But this group met every 3 or 4 weeks. It was all led by educators, for educators. I was really along for the ride when I could attend, and I'm really proud of the work that they've done. And there's some really critical, I don't think there's anything more important in our system right now, is around addressing some of these recommendations right away. And we'll talk about it in the budget. Some of them are already going to be tackled. Many of them will be tackled already in our budget proposal for next year. So I'm going to turn it over to Erica Boulware, who's a adjustment counselor at Holyoke High School North.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for having me. So just to speak briefly about the impetus for the mental health task force, and I'm going to warn you that we're going to be going sort of rapid fire. We have 10 minutes and then a little bit of time for some questions. So I apologize for the rapid speed. It's so that we can try to get things through quickly. So essentially, as people here are undoubtedly aware, there is a mental health epidemic in our country, and Holyoke is not untouched by that. And because we work in the school system, it's really important for us to have students who are ready to learn, who are having their mental health needs addressed and serviced before we expect them to do the rigorous work that we expect them to do at Holyoke Public Schools. So the impetus is really because we didn't have enough of a systematic approach to addressing the mental health needs in our district. And so that's really sort of the reasoning behind why we began the mental health task force. The other thing that I wanted to highlight is that we've begun a relationship with the Massachusetts School Mental Health Consortium. And that is an organization that's based mainly out of Eastern Massachusetts, specifically out of Methuen Public Schools. But we've become really highly integrated into their work, actually so much that they've asked me to be part of their leadership task force for the Western expansion into Western Massachusetts, which means that they'll be moving some of the services and the trainings and the professional development that they provide free of charge to mental health practitioners in districts over here, so that we'll be able to do a lot of that work with them as well. So you'll hear a few allusions to that particular organization, so I just wanted to give you the background of who they are.
Hi, I'm Sandy Dona. Part of the Mental Health Task Force's vision, and I think it's really important that you understand what that vision is that our hope is that all Holyoke Public School students have access to services and supports in meeting their mental health needs. And so this task force coming together really is the beginning of helping to make that happen. As you can see, one of the things you're going to notice is that you have 21 recommendations that we have brought forth. We're only going to focus on year one tonight, just to highlight what we hope to accomplish in the first year. And so we're kind of going to be sharing back and forth what some of those are. The first one for me is extremely important. We were really lucky to get 2 huge grants to build 2 programs, one at Holyoke High North and one at Peck and Veritas. And that's called the Bridge for Resilient Youth in Transition. And that's really a program for those kids who have mental health needs or who are coming back from hospitalization or have anxiety and really aren't able to go right back into the classroom and need some wraparound supports. So as a result of this grant, we're going to be up and running starting in September to help support kids over the short term, like 8 to 12 weeks, until they can be successful, reintegrated back into the classroom. We're very excited about this work. We'll be working over the summer for it. Another recommendation is that during our task force meetings, they were in the afternoons every 3 weeks, and we were taking our counselors out of the schools. Counselors are the linchpin. They're one of the most important people in a school when there are issues, when students are struggling, and to take them out has been really difficult for some of the counselors to even leave. And so our recommendation is once a month for the district to provide the resources so that we can do after school work and we can pay them so that they can stay in the schools and do the important work that they are doing. Our third recommendation is to really work on the job descriptions of counselors. We have more job descriptions, guidance counselors, adjustment counselors, or just school counselors, and we've got to change that and adjust it to meet our kids with mental health needs. The next thing that we also want to do is to work with River Valley. We have a partnership, they're in all of our schools, but we want to really strengthen that so that River Valley is part of the mental health team. They work with our students, and we don't want them to be in a vacuum. We want them to be part of the support team so that we can better support our kids.
So with regard to looking at the need for staff development around issues of suicidal, homicidal ideation, and self-harm, we've been working very hard, and this work started just prior to this counselor committee coming together. However, the energy and the enthusiasm of getting these folks together has really helped to develop a real comprehensive document that looks at not just mental health counselors, but also the role of nurses and teachers, administration, all staff, so that the expectation is that everyone who works with children within our district is very well trained in suicidal ideation and homicidal ideation, and that we have a very clear action plan. And this will be ready to be rolled out to our staff in August. And the other piece of that is that our plan is for every 3 years, we're providing a comprehensive 2-hour education on suicidal ideation, specifically for school staff. And this is in keeping with regulations that are set forth by the state. So in addition to every 3 years providing this 2-hour training through the Global Compliance Network, we've also written a pretty significant and detailed document that is going to be on the internet for our staff, and it's complete with questions and gives the opportunity for staff on those off years to be looking at these issues as well.
In case people are trying to follow along, we're on number 6 right now. And so one of the other things that we were talking about was making sure that not only are there school-wide mental health meetings or mental health meetings that are happening weekly, at least on a weekly basis in each building, but also that those are done with some systems in place so that they are effective time, they're efficient time, they're done well so that we don't have students who fall through the cracks. And so that's a really important part of the work to follow. It'll also mean having support from student health and academic services to make sure that those meetings are being run with fidelity, to be sure that appropriate measures are being taken, appropriate interventions are being implemented for students who need them. The next would be to continue with this Massachusetts School Mental Health Consortium work that we've begun, to make sure that all counselors have access to modes of communication that are confidential, that are compliant with both HIPAA and FERPA, and making sure that there are secured, dedicated faxes, things like that, so that students' information can be shared in a confidential manner and isn't we don't have to worry about that in any sort of way. So making sure that we have confidential voicemails for every counselor is a really important piece of that. We want to make sure that we provide schools with training and support regarding any sort of mandatory guidelines that we might come out with. One example is the transgender and gender nonconforming set of guidelines that was put through the Mental Health Task Force this year. But there may be other additional guidelines that we may need to create that have to do with the mental health needs of our students. And I also want to be really clear that when I talk about the mental health needs of our students, all of us have mental health needs, every single one of us. So I'm not saying these are students with problems or issues, right? It's every single one of us have mental health needs. We're all social, emotional beings, and we all need certain individual ways of being cared for. Finally, for the last bit of year one, the final goal would be to make sure that we are able to develop a district-wide crisis response team. There are other districts that have a similar sort of protocol where if there is a community tragedy of some sort, whether it's a death in the community, a natural disaster, et cetera, we have people who can really mobilize in that moment and be sort of on call to handle the mental health aspect of that. So that's year one. We have an easy 10 rounded off to be able to work on. And this is sort of where we thought we could get the most purchase in the first year. And we also thought that this would help implement year 2 and year 3 work. So this is sort of the groundwork that needs to be laid.
Before you take questions, can everybody just introduce themselves so we just know everybody knows who's representing the
Sure.
task force?
My name is Heather Tita. I'm a school counselor at Sullivan School.
I'm Sarah Major. I work for Veritas Prep Holyoke and Veritas Prep Springfield, so I'm on the network team, so I'm excited to be a part of this mental health task force this year.
Hi, Cynthia Carboni. I'm the Director of Health, Wellness, and Nursing for the district.
Ready to take questions, I'm guessing? Okay, great.
Yep. Alrighty, let's see. Anybody have any questions for the mental health task force? Go right ahead. Go ahead, Mariani.
Participation in a classroom is like a requirement for a grade, and people with extreme anxiety, their grades seems to be lower due to the participation because they just can't seem to raise their hand, or there's too much pressure put on them. And teachers still seem to push their students to participate because it's a requirement. And I've seen students burst out crying, walking out of classroom, even not wanting to present due to their anxiety. So like, in what part of your plan does that fall in?
Couple spaces. One is making sure that
No, there's a button.
I hit it, sorry. So one thing is making sure that we're meeting the individual needs of that student, but I think also what you're getting at here is around professional development with staff to make sure that they understand the implications of the mental health needs of their students. So I think there are teachers who, meaning well, perhaps think I'm going to push this student, I'm going to give them some tough love and really provide them with some structure and make sure that they really go get it. When the reality might be for that student that they might actually not be able to do that, right? And so what you're talking about is a common occurrence. It's something that happens in schools across the country. And I think the place where it really, where we have the most ability to change that is in the work that we do with all of our staff, counseling staff, mental health staff, administrative staff, to make sure that everyone understands the needs that students might have.
All right, thank you. Ms. Tinsley Williams?
Do you have any parents that's involved with your task force?
So currently, the task force is it had just been made up of membership of school staff. That's absolutely something that we want to include. Not only parents, but also students and external service providers. Great question.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Collmore?
Yeah, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate this very much. But student comes back to school, you know he or she has mental problems. Can they identify a person within the school district or in the school that they like, that would help them? You know, whether it be a coach whether it be a custodian, maybe a cafeteria worker or something like that, that they recognize and say, hey, that person will be someone that can help us out tremendously?
That's such an awesome question. And within the guidelines that we've put forth, one of our recommendations is that we work to identify, the student lets us know, or we identify those trusted adult role models in their lives, both at school and at home. And that's a real important piece, because it helps the student feel like they're among caring adults. And so the more of them that we can identify, the better. And that is actually written into the action plan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great question.
Ms. Brunel?
One of my questions was geared towards kind of like the younger students, with staff turnover and teachers leaving. I know sometimes that can be really hard on, say, younger students. So, like, what are we working on with, say, school counselors to, help students cope with these types of transitions that come up during the school year? Is that anything that we have I just know, say my daughter's class had a teacher leave for maternity leave, and then they hired a permanent sub and she didn't work out, and then they have a new transition. And, it's hard for the students. So, when you know that transition's coming, is there any, little services or, like a book students could read, or, something the principals could go over with them, or, just knowing that there's somebody available. I know a lot of our focus is with that, pubescent age and adolescence and high school, but, those younger kids, to start building that confidence and rapport with who they can, just say, hi, I'm having a bad day, or, I'm sad that Miss So-and-so's leaving, or, those transition points.
I think that that's a great piece of feedback. I don't know that the plan currently addresses that specific issue, but I do think supporting students around transition and loss is really important, whether it's students saying goodbye to students who leave from the class. I think a lot of times students leave very suddenly, and they're not able to say their goodbyes, but I do think it's important to teach children how to say goodbye, how to say things like I'll miss you, and how to process having those feelings when there has been a loss. So I think that that's a great suggestion.
I think on the micro end of things, that's really important. And then sort of on the macro end, I think also thinking about that the work of the mental health task force is to make sure that our students and communities are served. It's also to make sure that staff are served, right? So if you have staff who have really great mental health and are really happy working where they're working, we're not going to have that level of turnover. And so I think part of it is it's really prevention on two ends there, I think.
Mr. Burks?
Yeah, thank you. I like some of the things you said, especially professional development around staff. If it's presented the right way, I think some people see it as extra work, but it isn't extra. It's actually just changing the way you do the work that you're already doing, so that when you have those outbursts, or you'll have less of them when you know how to interact with someone who needs the proper supports, and when to give them and when to notice when they need those supports. I was looking at the fourth bullet under year one also, where it says update job descriptions. To update those descriptions, do you need more people in those roles, or are you changing roles? Talk about updating job descriptions.
I think one of the things we're going to look at is that there are so many different roles that some of our counselors have right now, and some of those roles are outdated, and so we need to look at them to ensure that what the description reads is actually what they're doing. So there has to be some change, I'm assuming, when we all come together and take a look at them.
Can I also respond to that too? I mean, we could always use more counselors. I mean, we do have, our ratios are better than most districts, but our needs are also greater as well. That being said, I think what I've learned from this group is the fact that during the school day, many of our counselors are performing other functions that aren't about servicing and supporting the needs of the mental health needs of kids. They're carrying the walkie-talkie around. They're dealing with discipline. They're covering, doing arrival, dismissal, covering lunch duty, which takes away from their ability to do what their their expertise is being misused. And so that's a big part of like redefining their, making sure that we're clear about what their role is. They're not supposed to be, they're not the dean of discipline. That compromises relationships with kids. I mean, I'm learning this. This is not, I've learned this from many of the folks across the room from me. And so we've got to look at that because it's taking away from, most buildings have 2 adjustment counselors. And if they're spending, even 25% of their time on other stuff, we're not utilizing them as well as we should be.
Mr. Sheehan?
Yeah, I just have a couple things, and I kind of read ahead to your 2 and 3 too. So since Dr. Zreich mentioned the whole walkie-talkie thing, I think it would be great to not have counselors in roles of duty and that type of stuff. But I mean, we can get there at some point, and I know that's what this is, right? This is a working progress. The walkie-talkie thing, I think, is a whole other issue, and I think that you wouldn't hand a math teacher a walkie-talkie and say, hey, you're not going to teach 3rd period. You're going to be doing discipline for a period. I mean, it doesn't work out, and I think you're absolutely right. Like, you can't be disciplining a kid and then 5 minutes later having to provide them support services. It doesn't work. I'd also like to see the district build some sort of capacity, because I know everywhere in the, I don't know if you'd find a district that doesn't do this, but in these types of positions, if someone's absent, the position's left open. And I mean, whether it's a day or whether it's a week, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, and I'm sure would be it will be even more difficult to find someone who's willing to come in and substitute for that, because it wouldn't be regular, there's fewer positions, all those things. But if we could at least develop some sort of list of whether it's retirees that are willing to come back, if someone's, and I don't mean like a maternity leave, I mean if someone's gonna be out for more than a week, that we have someone, because it's gonna get bogged down eventually with the work. So I mean, just to have a few people, and I'm sure that all of you know people who have been here who have left that may be willing just to work every once in a while if that is needed, because I think that's important. You never know on any given day what could happen. I mean, there could be no need to be there, but something could happen where you'd need someone in the building. I'd also just be interested at some point. I don't remember seeing this at all, and I'd just be interested to read it, the transgender, gender nonconforming guidelines that were developed. I don't know if we've seen those at all. I'd just be interested in.
Yeah, we can share them.
That.
They're complete as far as you're concerned, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yep, we can share them.
Sure.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll share, and then there's also going to be an implementation of rolling those out so that people are really aware of.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. I mean, just more to be educated than anything, just to see them.
And I appreciate the comment about thinking about the 1 week plus sort of provision of that. I think that's something that we can look at. That is, sort of sadly, it's in our year 3, but because we think we have some higher leverage with some of the other stuff earlier, and then can get there, like you said. So thank you.
Yeah, and it may not. I don't know, and maybe a week isn't right. You all know. I just think it's hard to leave a spot open. It's also hard to throw someone in for a day. I mean, I get that too. Like, it's just to be there for a day. So whatever that is, but just to kind of think about where that would fall, or if other districts do something around that.
Mayor Morse?
Thanks, Mildred. Well, thank you all for the work that you're doing. I think it's critically important, and I like the way that you're coming at this topic. Just a few different thoughts. To Devin's point as well about the transgender guidance, I'd be curious to see that. And that's obviously much more than just giving some guidance to teachers around how to speak about this. I think this is an area that a lot of folks, in particular, a lot of teachers, I would imagine, don't have the right vocabulary or language around, and even sometimes out of well-intentioned ignorance, and not having the right language is really harmful for students that may be questioning their gender identity. So I'd be curious of what that process and rollout looks like. If you could either come back, or Dr. Wright could provide us with some information about how that's implemented and what that looks like. And it's a much bigger conversation than just this, but making sure that students in the LGBT spectrum feel safe in the schools in general. And then the professional development, to Mr. Burke's point, would be curious about sort of what that looks like as well. I know there's a lot of students that are already connected to mental health services, but sort of how with referrals and connections that already exist, but how does it happen organically? Or like if I'm a student, sort of what it looks like for me to have an entry point into that. And the professional development to me is important in terms of how a teacher can potentially provide an intervention or a referral, like what to look for and when to make the referral or to have a conversation and send them to someone that can have a better conversation with them about that, sort of what their process looks like. And then I just find myself thinking about sort of the family aspect of this. And I know we can't do it all, but a lot of our students are suffering from mental health challenges as a result of mental health challenges being faced by their family members or parents in particular. And I would imagine some of our older students in particular are struggling with, being the head of household and having to worry about things that they shouldn't have to be worrying about as a 8th or 9th or 10th grader. So I guess I'm commenting more than I'm asking questions. But sort of how you approach those issues, and when it's more of a family issue, sort of what that process of referral or conversation looks like, rather than just a student-led challenge in front of you.
One of the things, there are two thoughts when you were speaking. One was about Enlace. Enlace is an organization that helps when we have families in need. And so we often are meeting with Enlace. We meet every month anyways. But they're really concerned. They have a really good relationship with the counselors. So there's a couple-pronged approach. It's when students aren't going to school, there's those kinds of referrals. But there's also referrals for families in need. And so we have that to start. And the other thing, for those students that are really struggling with mental health issues, when we talked about our new program at the high school in PAC, part of that is wraparound services, not just for the student, but to ensure that the family is involved as well. And so there's going to be a mental health clinician whose job it is to kind of circle the wagons to make sure that everybody gets what they need. So it's a start.
Mr. Collmore.
We're talking about all schools, not just Holyoke or Peck or something like that. Have you looked into the facilities, a certain area that you would take this child and try to help him or her? And is it properly equipped to service these children?
I think there's a range of availability in different buildings, depending on how updated the building is, et cetera, other factors. Certainly, in some buildings, there are, I have a private office where I can take a student and where I am frequently with at least one student during the day. And at least one student at a time, I should say, not just one student a day. That would be quite a thing. So there certainly are different numbers of spaces across different buildings. I know that most counselors do have a private space, I believe, where they can take students and have confidential conversations. So most do have a space like that. The beauty of it may be different from building to building. The aesthetics might be different, but there are spaces where those confidential conversations can happen.
Okay.
And specifically with the Bright program, there are some parameters or expectations with the program, and one of them is a large space, an area where students have place that they could relax and be comfortable, but also work and study together in a larger space. And then adjacent to that is a smaller counseling area. So that's something that we've been looking at Peck Veritas, looking at the nursing suite and the counseling suite, because we also have River Valley in place there through the school-based health center. And the program there works not just with academics and counseling, but also with nursing, bringing all three of them together to wrap services around the child and their family.
Ms. Rosalie Tinsley Williams.
We realize that bullying will always be. Do you have anybody, say the kids go to the cafeteria or taking a break or recess, maybe to have someone from the task force, not just be guarding them, but, kind of walking around a little bit, seeing what's going on as far as lunchtime or recess, because sometimes you can spot certain things. I don't know if you already have that.
I just want to comment on that. That's a great idea. I think one of the things, the recommendations for year one is to try to pull counselors away from those auxiliary duties and have them be more present during the times of day, like during lunch, when there's that heavy social interaction time, and there's really that opportunity to get in there as the counselor and really help kids build the social emotional skills that they need to kind of advocate for themselves, to kind of handle peer conflict, and to do those kind of social emotional learning skills that kids really need to kind of deal with bullying, to prevent bullying, to help them feel included, and to find their kind of group of friends.
Thank you.
Mr. Krishane.
Just trying to get a handle on what the numbers are. There seems to be like a really wide range of services, from students at risk or in need of further conversation, which sounds like maybe the entry level, and then children that may be suffering from depression or anxiety, all the way to suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation, self-injurious. How many kids are we talking about that fall into the just the widest? How many kids do you think you're going to be servicing, maybe even as a percentage? It may change from grade school to high school, I don't know. I have a follow-up question too.
So percentage-wise, I'm not sure, but I can say that the data on how many teens are suffering with some sort of mental health diagnosis are pretty high, and that's only the folks who have been diagnosed. So for students who have not been diagnosed, are either sub-threshold or haven't, more frequently haven't sought services. We're still a society that doesn't believe a lot of times in mental health, right? It's not something we can see, and so people sort of try to negate that its existence. So sadly, that means that a lot of people don't seek treatment. The numbers are therefore deceptively low from what we would see. So I think we would see a lot of our students who would need services. And we see a lot of our students who are currently getting services as well.
How many are currently getting services?
I don't have a number for that.
But okay. Again, I'm not trying to. I think more is better, but I'm just trying to. How do we provide the services that are necessary to meet the needs of our students? I'm just trying to get an idea that those numbers. And then the other thing that I do hear about as well, I do hear about these issues, and again, I think that they're very serious issues, and I do worry that we're not providing enough services to our students. I have two kids that just went through the high school, and I know that they have friends definitely that could have benefited, that they graduated with from services. I'm also hearing from teachers that also they themselves need services, and I'm hearing about secondhand trauma is a phrase that I've heard a lot. I'm just curious what services you might be providing for teachers with regard to trauma that they experience, maybe secondhand from things that happen in the classroom.
Yeah, so one of my backgrounds is really in providing career development, professional development for staff who work with young people. And so it depending on which, Holyoke High School North has gotten quite a bit, and Dean Campus as well has gotten quite a bit of professional development through the adjustment counselor at Dean Campus and the other adjustment counselor at North Campus and myself. And a lot of that is around either secondary trauma or vicarious traumatization, compassion fatigue, those kinds of things that happen for service providers of any sort, whether it's mental health professionals, teaching staff, janitorial staff, right? Everybody who touches a student life can be touched by that sort of issue. So making sure that goes sort of hand in hand with what I was saying about that we are also thinking about the mental health needs of our staff. That absolutely has to be something that we do as a district.
Is that it, Mr. Krishane?
That's it. I don't have any more.
Anyone else have any questions? Mr. Sheehan?
Yeah, I just, Mr. Collmore asked a question before about space, and I think that his bullware was a little modest or hesitant, but I mean, the space is not necessary or is not perfect at all, and people have to know that they're making do with a situation that isn't great for a space that they're in. I mean, our buildings are not equipped to deal with all of the mental health needs of our students at all. And I mean, they're not in a position to be. I mean, that's why we're designing 2 new buildings that will at least help and accommodate some of the mental health needs of our students. So I don't think that rooms with no windows or rooms with clouded out windows where students can't have a space where they can relax in and talk with a counselor, work with the counselors anywhere near where we need to be. And I think they're making a good thing out of a not so great situation with their accommodations. And they didn't want to come out here and say that, but I mean, I'll say that it's because they're making do and doing the best they can with what we give them, and we could give them so much more.
Okay, I have a few questions. Well, I thank you guys. Why did you smirk? So I do want to thank you guys for working on this and bringing forth your recommendations. But I am going to say, just as I told Dr. Reich not so long ago, kind of disappointed because at the same time there was a mental health task force that involved people in the community, organizations that are working with families in Western Mass, with children that have mental health disabilities. You also had the child supervisor for the children's mental health, which that's a piece that we tend to forget. We're more apt and more quick to involve DCF and very laid back in inviting DMH, which are the true providers for mental health services for adults as well as for children. So my questions are as follows. Regarding your meetings that you're going to be having with mental health related meetings with counselors, nurses, are you also including River Valley Counseling Center, whether or not they work with the student?
Are we including them in the weekly meetings?
In your weekly meeting?
Yes.
Okay, whether or not they work with the student?
Correct. They're already invited. It has to do with their capacity as well, unfortunately. So if they're not able to come because they're fee for service, so they get paid for what they do. They don't necessarily get paid. That's something that we're trying to actually work out in meetings with them right now, is how can we help them get reimbursed for being at meetings like that, whether or not, like you said, they're related with that student.
So with that being said, did you receive consent from the family to allow to discuss anything in respects to the child with a provider that is not their provider? And mind you, that psych, when it comes to psych information, substance abuse, HIV/AIDS, that's protected information. You have to have a separate consent. Do you have that?
Yes, so they don't come to parts of the meeting where it's not a student that they are uniquely involved with currently.
So my question was, even if they're not working with them, in the sense that that's not their client, so are they still part of that meeting?
So then I misunderstood the question. I apologize. So no, they would not be involved in that part of the meeting.
Okay, so you're not discussing anything about anybody else other than the students that they're currently working with?
Correct.
Okay. The other question is, what happens when they are working with someone else? Are you inviting them to the meeting to be a part of your weekly meeting when they're working with a different provider?
When they're working with an outside provider?
A different provider, yeah.
We could invite them. We have invited in certain cases external providers to come in. It means that we have to time everything perfectly. And typically those meetings are, if it starts at 1 and we say that we're going to discuss this case on the agenda at 1:08, which is really what it comes down to. The agendas are that clear. And we run 2 minutes early, then that becomes an issue. So we do like to let providers know that.
So the reason that I say this is because I don't want this to become, let's make all referrals to River Valley. When we're looking at agencies such as River Valley, Gandara, CHD, when you're working within that network and you have a therapist within that network, it takes quite a while just to see a psychiatrist, right? And if you don't have a therapist, then you're not seeing the psychiatrist. And so some families seek services elsewhere. So they might seek a psychiatrist in one location and a therapist in another. And the other thing is about developing relationships. We can't force a relationship just so that we have another referral for River Valley and that they can do their fee for service and bill for it. So that's why I'm saying we have to find the way. If we're looking at servicing the child as a whole and wraparound, when you're looking at ICC, you're looking at working with everybody, even those outside of the network. So even if it means doing phone conference, then how can we do that?
Yeah, I certainly think building our capacity to continue to participate in ICC teams would really be great. I know speaking for myself, I'm always happy to have meetings with outside providers who are not affiliated with River Valley. I think just specifically during those internal care team meetings, that might be very logistically difficult to organize multiple staff from different agencies to all be arriving at, 10-minute increments. But it's definitely a fair point to be continuing to outreach and build those connections with providers who are not at agencies such as River Valley.
Okay, thank you. I did like your comment that you said that mental health, a lot of people don't look at it as an illness because, again, you can't see it. So how are we to say that they have it? So with that respect, seeing it as an illness, as a disease, as nurses, what are we doing in respects to medical care plans, and what's your role when we're talking in these meetings?
Exactly. The whole purpose of the work that we're doing around developing the third tier or the Bridge or Bright program is to look at the total health of the student, to look at them not just physically, but of course mentally, and working together. So it's not just nursing, it's not just counseling, but we're really working hand in hand to develop these approaches with the students. So as part of the structure that we're building in and we call it an action plan or steps, that we'll have a standardized set of steps that everyone will follow and we'll have consistency around the district. So we'll know what is the role of the counselor, what is the role of the nurse, what is the role of the teacher, and it's all spelled out very clearly. So we know what we're doing, and there's a sense of I think, cooperation and communication that we have as an expectation. So none of us are in our silos anymore. We've brought it all together, and I think we're going to see great benefits for the students.
I kind of didn't hear what the role of the nurse is. I just heard that we're going to make changes to the roles, but as
So
the
you want
nursing
more
director,
specifics.
kind of what
Sure.
are you looking to have your nurses be in their role when they're at these meetings? And how are
Sure.
they going to be representing the student?
Aha, okay, I understand your question. So basically, they're going to need to have conversations about their medication with both the family and the student, and helping the team to understand what the effects of that medication are, and that sometimes it takes time. It might take weeks, not just days, but weeks for a medication to take effect. And also, is it the right medication? And to have patience and not get frustrated if it takes time to change medications out for a student. So the nurse would be able to comment and support specifically around those components. And also in terms of who a student can turn to. Oftentimes a student, just because of that relationship they have with the nurse, because the nurse is giving their medications daily, they might share things just because of the sheer amount of time that they're in conversation with the nurse. So the role is very clear then of when to bring in a counselor with that to get that additional support, and also and especially working with that outside counselor and having that communication to contribute to the care planning, not just physical care planning, which has been one of our focuses, but also mental health care planning and making sure that we're involving as many of the supports around that student as possible.
So you're looking at developing medical care plans to identify or to address the mental health piece?
Yes.
And the medications?
Yes.
Great. So with that, Dr. Zreik, are nurses able to, or is there a way that nurses can be able to have communication with the ordering physician for the medications and kind of have a
Yes.
two-way as to if they're seeing something wrong with the way the medication is working, isn't working, then that way the
But only
ordering
with a
physician-
signed release from the family. The parent or guardian would need to have provided a release of information, informed consent for the nurse to be able to talk with the provider. And we do ask that right from the start, and we encourage that to happen. But we would always go through the parent or guardian first before we did that.
Okay, so we do have those forms. Great.
Yes, we do.
So thank you guys very much. I know one of the things that I'm hoping that we could get is kind of the data, current data that we have. So the percentage of students requiring services, that you may feel, I know that the mental health rate is already at 25% for kids, for adolescents across the United States. So 1 in 4 are being diagnosed. And then the percentage of students that are currently receiving services within our district. So if that's something that we
Sandy,
can get.
Can you write that down, Sandy? Okay. I mean, I'll write it down too, but that's I'm going to go to Sandy and ask her those questions. So.
Anybody have any other questions? Nope. All right. Well, thank you guys.
Actually, so sorry. Could I just ask a
Go right ahead.
clarifying question? When you
Absolutely.
said the percentage of students receiving services, did you mean individual outpatient services such as through River Valley or another clinic, or do you mean percentage of students who are accessing the school counselor, both of those things?
It's currently, so, and you know, I didn't even address this, but when we're looking at the IEP
Just so we
as
provide
well.
what you're looking
When
for.
you're looking at the IEP, there's indirect service and there's direct service. So you should be able to identify immediately which ones are receiving some sort of service within the school, be it the school adjustment counselor or be it River Valley Counseling. It should be in there. But also, they might not have an IEP, so they might be on a 504. So really identifying which students are really receiving those types of services, but that are not easily identified by means of an IEP or a 504. Because sometimes in the 504 you might have that in there, that they meet weekly, but
There are many students who don't have either a 504 or an IEP who are still receiving individual outside counseling.
right. So if you guys can kind of rough up the numbers, you know, like this is how many we definitely know, but we might be, so if you came up with 38%, but we might be at 40% because we have the unidentified. It kind of helps, it kind of brings things to light. And maybe people will start seeing, wow, you know, mental health is a growing illness. It is a growing disease. So how are we going to help these children, right? It's not to look at them as they choose to be this way, but more of they're having a difficulty. So what do we need to put into place to make sure that they succeed just like anyone else that doesn't have an identified mental health issue? Thank you. I think I said a lot, and everybody.
Thank you very much.
I cut it short.
Thank you all very much
your
for having
time.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On to the budget.
It's budget time. Fiscal year 20 budget presentation.
Okay, we're gonna jump right into this. We're gonna try to make this long presentation as brief as possible. Anthony and I, you know, we want to give you ample time just to ask questions. This is really the budget. We do have a balanced budget, which is good news. You'll see the full budget at the next meeting where we'll have our budget hearing, and you'll get the full document as you're accustomed to. But I'm just going to give you a overview of what's in the budget, what's not in the budget for the upcoming school year. So I'm just going to, I'm not going to go through our vision and mission, but I am going to, I'm going to turn your attention to our priorities for the upcoming school year. This is building off of our conversations with at the retreat. You can see the 4 areas that we are that are core to our turnaround plan, and then this lens of equity, which is about access and inclusion for all kids, is something that we have to continue to ask ourselves: is this really about all kids or just some students and some families? I did just want to quickly this is some preliminary progress. These are the goals that we set for our key goals for the upcoming. We have 1 million goals in the turnaround plan, but these are some of the key ones we had pulled out and presented at the start of last school year. We don't know how many of our accountability targets we hit for 18-19 because MCAS data has not come out yet. We do know that we did get our graduation rate. Our target was 70%, and we hit 72%. Our chronic absenteeism, our target was 20%. We're likely not going to hit that, but we hope to be better than 25%. So we're probably going to fall, we hope, at around 24%. Our goals in terms of days lost to suspension, we are well on pace to meet that goal it doesn't look too great, 2,200 days, but it's still a decline from the previous year. I'm sorry, here it does say, on day 152, we were at 1,794 days lost to suspension. And then, I'm sorry, to date, we were, for our chronic absenteeism right now, or just last week, we were at 23.9% chronic. Okay. We did just get the survey results back from families, and you can see, and we're going to go over that at the next meeting, but one of our goals was families feeling equipped to support their child's learning at home. Our target was 51. We hit 58%. The next one's disappointing to me. Students reporting their culture and language are respected. It was 70% in 17-18, and it was flat for this year. We were hoping to be at 75%. We were flat. And then teachers reporting their work environment is positive. We were at 36% in 17-18, and we hit 48% in 18-19 in the recent survey that we just got back. And then with certified teachers, we don't know yet how many we'll retain because the end of the school year is coming. But you can see where this just tells you how our data around observations of teachers. By mid-April, 76% of our teachers had 3 observations and 90% had 2 observations. Yep.
Quick question. On the students reporting their culture and language are respected, what students are we talking about? Was that the whole district?
The whole district, yeah, the whole district. It was actually the same number. I think it was 71% at the high school and 69% in K-8. But yeah, the survey's broken down in 2, but we did it as an aggregate for this. Okay, so these are our initiatives for the upcoming year. Again, every year I've trimmed them down to be more focused, more targeted than the year before. I think my first year here we had 50, then we went down to 30, and now we're really down to just 4 or 5 key initiatives. These are very much in sync to what we discussed at the retreat. We talked about under instruction, it's about creating tiers of support for kids' academic, social, emotional, and behavioral needs. Strong core, and then tiers of support. That is the focus. That is our primary focus for the upcoming school year, is building out our tiers of support for kids who are struggling academically, behaviorally, and social emotionally. Under family and community engagement, we continue to be committed to this idea of two-way communication. You'll see that the data did improve on the survey in terms of families feeling more connected at school, but we don't feel like we're done. We know that parents want and need more information about their child's progress. Again, academically, behaviorally, and social emotionally. And then finally, we have to do a better job of aligning our partnerships with community organizations, with partners, to support. I'm going to keep going back to this theme: academic, social, emotional, and behavioral needs of kids. And then finally, around professional culture, our priority is around teacher voice. I think this is an area that we've been stagnant around. We built turnaround around making sure that teachers had more decision making and voice in what happens in their schools. I think we've seen some schools do that well, but not enough. And when we look at why teachers leave, it's when they don't feel like they have agency or they don't have a voice in what happens at their respective schools. We have to double down in this area because I don't feel that enough teachers believe that at their school level they have enough influence on what happens at their respective schools. So this is where I want to just, I'm not going to read you all of this, but I do want to go through where we are investing, what we're investing in for the upcoming school year. A couple things. Just generally with this budget that we've worked on as a school district, there are not any significant cuts. Okay, other than the fact that we right-sized to the size of the district, we did not change class sizes. We did not cut schools' discretionary dollars. We did not, we continued to grow the programs that we had already started to grow. We made we made an additional investment in dual language. We're expanding dual language programming. We're going to continue to grow Veritas and the STEM program, and of course our high school academies. None of that changes in the plan, in the budget. The only significant programmatic issue is that we have lost funding right now for the 4 preschool expansion classrooms. That was federally funded. We are still looking to figure out how to fund those, but those 4 classrooms that VOC and Head Start ran, there is no funding right now for those 4 classrooms because the state grant runs out in in August, and the state we believe, is putting out a competitive grant proposal, but we don't know at this time whether we will have funds to maintain those 4 classrooms, which is a big problem for us because we've talked about expanding pre-K. We are expanding with 2 additional dual language, but we're going backwards, right, in the 4 PEG classrooms. I just want to bring that up. We were on a call today. We're still advocating for funding for those 4 classrooms. That is my most significant concern in this upcoming budget.
I have a quick question
Sure.
on that.
Yep.
So with the not knowing, right? Yes. And you're saying that you'd probably find out by August.
That's right.
That is very short timing for the families that currently have their kids in it. That would probably still.
Well, those kids are all they're 4-year-olds, so they're all going to kindergarten. It's about the kids that are applying to get in. So no child who's in a 4-year-old program is going to lose their seat because the program closes. All the students are going to kindergarten. It's that we wouldn't be able to accept any new students into the classes for September or end of August.
Okay, because I was just thinking students that would turn 5 after.
The students are all
after our cutoff time.
These are all kids that are meet the cutoff because they can't get into the 4-year-old program if they aren't 4 before September 1st.
Oh, okay, so that runs the same way. Okay.
Yes, that's right.
Gotcha.
Right. So this is a long list. I'm not going to read you all of the investments that we will be making around curriculum purchases. Most of it is around intervention supports across the district in math and in ELA. There's also investments in new curriculum across the district. We are also going to invest in a STEM an innovative grants director for the first time because we want to build our science and technology programming across the district. We've never had that position, but we feel like it's critical in a district that hasn't paid enough attention to the science, technology, and engineering space. And you can see the significant investments. It's dual language curriculum with the grant that we won from DESE. We're investing in new curriculum there. So. And the high school, for the first time in a long time, is purchasing new curriculum in ELA and biology, social studies, and interventions. We've done a lot with grades K to 8. This is the first year we're going to be investing at the high school level. In terms of our operations, as you know, we're replacing windows and doors at multiple schools. Those projects have already started at Morgan, Kelly, and Sullivan. And then we are waiting to hear about grant funding for security cameras. And then we put a proposal in to create a vestibule for Holyoke High North, so that, similar to Dean, you can't access the building without funneling into the office. We're optimistic that we could win this. We will win this grant, and that work would happen over the summer. As Devin mentioned before, this budget does include the purchase of 4 new vans for transportation purposes. They are meant to be used predominantly at the high school level for community-based learning, internships, early college. We've also allocated resources to implement many of the task force recommendations that we have here, and we plan to make additional purchases in technology to continue to move the district to 1-to-1 with additional Chromebooks. I think we did mention a few meetings ago that 2 schools will be 1-to-1 with iPads next year, STEM and PEC. And our goal is to move the entire district over the next 3 years so that students have access, not necessarily that they take the devices home, but they have access essentially to one-to-one in their classrooms. With family and community engagement, the big investment in this budget is to and I hadn't included this in your this was a new bullet that I added for this presentation, is increased funding for translation and interpretation. We went over budget by, I think, $90,000 in translation and interpretation this school year. And so we right-size that in this budget proposal, includes additional funding for translation and interpretation. We are adding additional support to the enrollment center. I'm as confident as I've been that our enrollment will be the smoothest it's ever been, but we're hiring people now to start the process so that we don't get into the crunch that we have previously with enrollment. And then we are going to launch an arts task force in the upcoming school year to look at arts programming across HPS. Finally, professional culture. There is an investment in here around teacher compensation. We have a proposal to the HTA around a new contract that does include additional compensation for teachers. And while they have not agreed to the contract yet, the budget does include those raises for teachers. It also includes our other obligations for all employees per the contracts that we renegotiated a whole slew of contracts last summer, beginning of fall. The budget does build in for that. It also does build in resources for additional professional development, as we will have half days next year. Again, 3 additional half days for teacher collaboration. And we are moving to, when our days off during the year are going to be back to back, so we can create more of a conference style professional learning experience for teachers. So I'm going to stop there around investments and our continued commitments. To address this budget gap, is this your?
Yes.
I'm going to hand this to you. Oh, do you have a question?
Real quick.
Yep.
Let's just see if anybody has any questions. And one moment. Okay, we still have quorum. Mr. Sheehan.
Yeah, on page 14 at the bottom of it, it mentions invest in filtered water stations throughout the district. I mean, what's the purpose of that? We get high ratings from the EPA and the federal government that we have great water, so what's the purpose of doing that?
If you recall, a couple of years ago, we had water testing done throughout the district, and there were some water stations that we ended up taking off a line because they weren't necessarily used as often, or they didn't have the levels of lead in them that were appropriate for drinking. Not that any level is appropriate, but we've been really trying to take those water stations that we had taken offline and put in some new filtered water stations. They're very green, so like you can fill up a water bottle. It counts. I don't know if you've seen them at a gym. They're really popular with the principals and the kids. Kids are drinking more water in the schools that do have them. We've already rolled out 10 in different locations, and we are in the process of purchasing 10 more so that we can spread them out through the district and kids can have more access to clean water.
Yeah, we had taken a bunch of them, not a bunch, but there was a group of water fountains we had taken offline. We're slowly been replacing them with these brand new fountains.
And this vestibule thing, so it's definitely not happening if we don't get the grant.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say that. I mean,
Anthony might
the
magically find
Senate budget right now, we stand to gain $1.5 million from what's in this right here. Not to say that that's going to pan out, but if something like that pans out, I know that this is one of
Huge
Dr.
priority.
Reich's huge priorities in making sure that we build a safe entrance there at the Holyoke High School.
Okay.
Really quick on the English learner pack, have we already identified the parent leaders for there? And
Yeah, we've had 3 meetings thus far this year. We have yet to identify we've yet to have parents come forward to be the leaders for that. We thought we were close, but we're still trying to convince families. So if you know of any parents, we are looking for parent leaders like we do have for the CPAC.
So we're kind of still not in compliance because we do need to have.
Well, we're in compliance because we've been meeting.
Yeah, and you don't even need to meet more than once if you
Yeah,
don't
we've
step
been.
up.
That's
The
true.
obligation is the district organizes the meeting once. No one steps up. You do it again the next year.
Yeah,
So we're over.
We've done 3 meetings already. So, but we are. It would be wonderful if we had parents who would step up and lead that group.
So Dr. Drake gets to he got to present on all the exciting stuff. I get to go through all the boring stuff, but I've been told to keep it really short because I get a little long-winded with this stuff. But I did present a lot of this information to you folks about a month and a half ago, so I'll try to be brief. On the revenue side, we're looking at a $3.3 million increase, which is about 3.9% in our net school spending number. That's offset by about $1 million in charter reimbursement. So as I mentioned previously, the governor had proposed as part of his budget implementing slowly some of the Chapter 70 reform, and I just we just the budget for the Senate budget, actually everything in this packet is based on the House's budget. The Senate's budget looks a lot better than the House's budget, but by the time we had to submit the budget to the city and put this presentation together, we usually don't update for Senate anyways because we don't know if it's going to stick. So right now, what you see in all of these numbers represents what was in the House's budget. And we will, once the budget is finalized, we will go back and adjust any numbers that need to be adjusted. And if need be, have to go back in front of the city council to adjust for the new Chapter 70 numbers. So one of the biggest things that we're doing on the revenue side this year is we're able to utilize so we got more Puerto Rico money than we had initially anticipated. So the strategy here is we don't want to make any cuts to schools at this point, and we think that if the Chapter 70 reform continues to grow at the pace that it did this year, that we'll be able to soften the blow by using some of this one-time revenue right now to avoid having to cut. And hopefully next year there's more revenue coming through Chapter 70 reform, and we'd be in a good position to be able to at least operate with what we have. On the expense side, we're expecting salaries to go up about about 1 million or 2.2%. Health insurance is one of our biggest cost drivers. Health insurance is one of our biggest cost drivers. We currently in our budget, we have about a 15% increase in health insurance for active employees. That's offset by a slight decrease for retirees. So what you see in front of you there is about 12.6% or 810,000. And the amount of funding that we have to on the general fund for our out-of-district tuition for some of our special ed population has to increase because we have some dwindling circuit breaker carryover. Usually we have a pretty sizable balance on our circuit breaker. They allow you to spend that money over a 2-year period. And at the end of every year, if we're looking at any surpluses, one of our strategies to balance the budget is usually to increase that circuit breaker carryover. This year, that's a challenge because we're depleting a lot of our revolving accounts. So as that goes away, it doesn't necessarily mean that our out-of-district costs are rising by that much. It's just the portion that we have to fund on our operating budget is going up every year as carryover dwindles. So what you see on the next slide, which is on page 19, is a snapshot. You can see that initially the governor's budget had us at a $5.2 million deficit, and that included some very high-level assumptions. As we went through the staff allocations and asked departments to submit their budgets, we got the deficit down to $4.1 million, adjusting for enrollment. And then the final budget included an offset of about 2.1 million in that from that Puerto Rico money and school choice revenue that we're getting additional for next year. And we also adjusted our out of district as well. So what we're proposing is a balanced budget. Like I said, things look good in Senate, but we don't have that built into our numbers yet, and we won't present a budget until the state finally releases their budget. The next slide is so this is what the city's appropriation to the school department is. This is probably going to be a really confusing year in terms of how the budget's presented to the city. And the reason I say that is because the charter assessments, the cherry sheet assessments, they were never really appropriated through the budget process. And what we're proposing this upcoming year is that they do get appropriated through the budget process. And it looks like our budget's going up 22 million, but that's not the case. Our budget, if you take out those assessments for charter school and school choice, you could see that they're $15 million. And you could see that the city is not pulling that funding away from us and setting it aside somewhere else. They're actually going to be appropriating it in our budget. So it looks like our budget's going up that much, but it's not really. It's just a change in the way we treat the charter assessments and school choice assessments. I know that's going to be really confusing, but we talked to the mayor and we met with the city auditor, and in fact, this year, in the middle of the year, we did talk to the city council and tell them that this was coming. But I could see where it will be confusing. So you can see that we start with net school spending, we back out the admin costs, we add charter reimbursement, and then on top of that, that's when we get what our net school spending number is, and then on top of that, the city contributes the transportation, the central office lease, and the Medicaid billing expense that we incur, and they end up getting about $1.4 million in revenue for that. And then they do back out of our appropriation the insurance, the health insurance and fringe benefit, to get what our total appropriation would be, which is $87 million. Any questions on that?
Anybody have any questions? Can we talk about the Medicaid reimbursement?
Yes, ma'am.
So what do we pay out?
About 1.4 million. It fluctuates between 1.2 and 1.6.
That comes out of the net school spending budget.
No, that's just a separate revolving account, or it's a separate revenue source that the city uses to as part of their operating budget.
No, but the schools pay for the services first. So they pay the service provider, be it the physical therapy, occupational, whoever it is.
Mm-hmm.
The schools pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
The city bills, they contract with someone to get the reimbursement back from Medicaid, correct?
The school department actually contracts with Lower Pioneer Valley Collaborative.
And then that comes out of our budget?
So we administer that process.
Mm-hmm.
And what the city does is they realize that that's an expense to us because we got to pay Lower Pioneer Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, here, we're going to give you the money. You pay for Lower Pioneer Valley and work with them. And then the revenue goes to the city.
So if you pay 1.2 million, you're kind of saying that they're taking back in 2.2 million?
We pay about between 100 and 200,000.
You pay about 100 to 200,000.
Not in services to kids. It's just the service for Lower Pioneer Valley to work on the admin, the Medicaid billing process.
But you still have to pay the person who's providing the service. That's still a worker.
Correct.
Through the Holyoke Public Schools.
Correct.
Okay. So out of those 200,000 that you pay, that's for the admin services for collecting from the health insurance.
It turns out to be 100,000. The reason this number is 200,000 is because the mayor did agree to add an additional $100,000 to help support the pre-K expansion, the dual language expansion.
Okay. But then the money that we spend to pay for the service to the employee, that's separate. We
Staffing.
don't get any of that
Correct.
back. That's part of,
That's just part of our operating budget.
so you figure we're paying for that. Then for the 200,000 that we paid these people to collect back, reimbursement, about roughly what do you think the city gets back that they can use into their own budget to pay for stuff for the city or services
It
throughout the
fluctuates
city?
between 1.2 and 1.6 for the last
1.2 to 1.6
4 years.
that
the
they
last time I checked.
automatically get.
Yep.
So I'm wondering.
It's not automatic. We got to go through that
Right, we're the ones that are
process
paying the
with the vendor.
200,000. They give us the
We do random
200,000.
moment time studies. We go through that whole process. We sign off on the claim, and then the city gets the revenue.
Okay, well,
That's
then you got to
typical.
take off the 200,000, obviously, that they gave you to pay these people.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. The next slide. The next slide is how we address the budget gap. So we looked at all funding sources available. We did ask central office departments to submit 10% reductions. And we also went through a process of adjusting our staff allocations to reflect enrollment and to reflect the targeted class size ratios that we've had at least since I've been here. We also reviewed all the high level accounts, and like I said, we finally balanced the budget with about $2.1 million in one-time revenue. So some of the big budget assumptions, again, this is based on House Ways and Means. So anything that happens between the House Ways and Means budget and the final budget will have to be adjusted. We are budgeting based on the assumption that the city will meet their net school spending requirement and their local contribution. That's a big assumption that we're making in this budget. We haven't sat down and presented anything to the city council yet, and we're very hopeful that they meet their requirement. Also included as a big budget assumption is that circuit breaker is not going to be cut from what we initially built into the budget. We're also assuming Title I won't be cut and that all the E-rate applications will be approved. In addition, enrollment will be consistent with the enrollment that we use for school staffing allocations. Utilities are not going to drastically go up, and that personnel lost time would be about $600,000. So if we go 2 slides over, the majority of the district's general fund budget comes from state aid, as many of you know, about 87.2%, and only 12.8% comes from city's local taxes, with the exception of transportation. We did pull a list of all of the districts that were published on DESI's website, and we're one of 9 communities in the entire state that is funded either at or below the minimum net school spending requirement. And on average, if you calculate what every district funds versus their net school spending requirement, on average, districts fund an average of 41% above the net school spending requirement. And just to put things into perspective, if Holyoke had the ability to do that, if they had the tax revenue, if they had the ability to do that, that would be an additional $33 million in the school's budget. The next slide shows how fiscally dependent we are. I mean, we just discussed this, but this is just a visual so that you can see how much of our budget comes from state funding versus local funds.
Really quick, I have
Yes.
someone has a question, Mr. Sheehan.
So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, that we'd have an extra 33 million, but I mean, if the city didn't make you balance a budget off of saving money from the prior year and using one-time resources that shouldn't be made to balance a budget, I mean, we would even save money. I mean, we're piecing together a budget in patchwork. And
Yeah.
how much of the budget is based on, how much are we using off of carryover?
Well, it's none off of carryover. It's 1.5 in Puerto Rico money,
Okay.
and then about 600,000 in one of our revolving accounts. So our school choice revolving account has been going up. You know, we're bringing in more kids.
But we're not bringing anything from 19 to 20.
Right now, that's not built into this budget.
Okay.
Right.
So will there be any?
There could be. I did early payroll projections. As we get closer to the end of the year, I'll be able to put a much more accurate carryover projection.
Okay.
But it's not something that's factored into this budget.
Right,
If
but
there-
how much do you think will be in carryover? I mean, it's already.
I don't have a
May.
number right now.
Okay.
I can certainly
I
go
find
back
that odd
and
that you don't have an estimate at all for that of what. I mean, I'm assuming you're doing budget reports every month that you would see
Mhm.
what we're not hitting on target that was budgeted. So, I mean,
right. We just did a requisition deadline. We asked schools to spend all of their money by May 1st. We've granted some extensions, so some of that is still going on. There's a lot of stuff that might be coming through for summer school, but I can certainly go back and put some projections together and see where we're at.
yeah, thank you.
Can you just
Oh, Mr. Burke, sorry.
go on?
Mhm.
Yeah, just one time. Go back to that. I apologize for making you go back to it, but I was still, you're right, it is a little confusing. The 15 million from charter tuition and school choice and how that happened from 19, 0 and 20.
Yeah, so that $15 million that you see in 19's budget, normally what would happen is the city would back that off of our appropriation. That represents the amount of money that we're going to be passing through to charter schools. So what they would do is they wouldn't appropriate that in our budget, and they would actually set it aside. It wouldn't even be an appropriation in anybody's budget. There was like the Schedule A or on the tax recap that they had it. So when we went to the city and asked them, so in December, the state first, right now what we have is a cherry sheet number. And then in December, they actually count how many charter schools and school choice kids are out there. And then they adjust those numbers. When they did that last year, it turns out that the city owed us some money because they overestimated. So they say, here's your charter assessment. They put it aside to pay charters, and they weren't going to use all that. So we had gone to the city council to ask them to make that correction. And turns out that that's never appropriated through the budget process. So we said we were going to fix that this upcoming year through the budget process. So instead of the city taking that 15 million and putting it aside somewhere else, they're just going to leave it in our budget and we can manage it. And then if the state projections go up or down in December,
Handle it yourself.
right, we'll handle it ourselves instead of having to go to city council and ask them to transfer money.
Thank you.
Okay. So I believe that's slide 27. So you can see we did a list of all of the districts that have the lowest local contribution in comparison to the total foundation budget, and Holyoke is third, contributing only 12.8% of the total net school spending amount. Lawrence leading the pack, and then Springfield in second. That just goes to show how much of the funding is actually reliant on state funding, Chapter 70. The next slide is just, again, another visual of a previous slide that you had seen. And I think the point here that we want to make is that the majority of our costs is staffing. If you take 70% 77% of our in-district costs, so if you don't count the charter tuition and out-of-district tuition, 77% of our costs, including benefits, is staffing. Some of our major cost drivers are salaries, health insurance, charter tuition, and sped out-of-district tuition. So you'll see on the next slide, we show average teacher salaries. In 17, it was 60, and 18, it went up to about 62, and we had a slight dip this current year, primarily due to some retirements or some vacancies that weren't filled or long-term subs in positions. We didn't touch the salary schedule. That's just how it ended up turning out, and what we're looking at for next year, including the increase that Dr. Zreich had mentioned, is about 63.5 for an average salary. The next slide is health insurance. You can see that it continues to go up. As I mentioned, for active employees, we budgeted about 15%. And you can see that on average, the health plan costs, the city's portion, that would be the portion that we're responsible for, is about $9,700 annually. And that continues to go up every year. The next slide just shows our trend in charter tuition versus charter reimbursement. The idea being that charter tuition continues to rise and the reimbursement goes down. And then at the bottom you can see the district shortage. This is basically what the difference between what we actually get reimbursed versus what we should be getting reimbursed, assuming that the state fully funds the charter reimbursement. You can see that on average we're shorted about $1 million every year.
We have a question.
Sure.
For the assumptions above for 20, are you basing that off of the House's new charter reimbursement, or are you basing it off of the old numbers of what it should be?
It was the cherry sheet that we got for the House's numbers.
But is that based off of the change in the 160/40, or is that still the old assessment?
I believe it's the new.
Okay.
Yeah. Because the governor made that in his proposal. I don't think the House reverted it back.
No, they changed it. They kept the scale, but they changed the assessment amount. And
They changed the assessment amount,
Yeah.
and we adjusted it
And
to.
the Senate maintained the assessment amount.
Yep.
And altered the scale a little bit too.
Right. So I looked at the Senate, and we're looking to get another $300,000 in charter reimbursement than what's built into these numbers for FY20, which would be great.
Yeah. So I think in conference nothing will change.
Right. And then the other cost driver on the next slide is our out of district costs. So this just shows that what we get through the what we spend versus what we get through the Chapter 70 revenue, Chapter 70 formula, and circuit breaker revenue isn't enough to cover the costs that we're spending on some of our out of district placements, or all of our out of district placements. This is where I'll turn it over to Steve for his final thoughts.
Just, you want to click over, Anthony? Go to the final slide. So I just want to go back to the budget being aligned to the 4 priorities. Most of, as we talk about building supports in schools for behavior, academics, and social emotional learning, that's where the majority of the new investments are focused. And any new revenue that we're able to generate is going to continue to go to those areas across the schools. We don't feel like we have other needs beyond now. Just we'd like to build in for more interventionists, more coaches, more mental health support at the schools if more resources are available through the budget process. And we are, as a district, continuing to talk about what equity really means. And when we talk about all kids, are we making sure that there's inclusion, access, and opportunity for all students and how we allocate our resources? And so I'm going to end there. Thank you for, I know it's a long presentation, but wanted to open it up for any final questions that folks had about this proposed budget.
Mr. Collmore?
Excuse me, grants.
Yep.
Are we getting the amount of money that we're really looking for in grants?
There's never, we always want more, but we have won a number of grants, I think more this year than I've seen in prior years. The state is going to continue to fund close to $1 million in their turnaround grant funding. That's a little bit less. Every year they trim us down in what we get. But we are getting, we have grants coming for the mental health programs at Holyoke High, at Veritas and Peck. We just won a big grant for middle school athletics to $25,000 to enhance the middle school athletics program. And we've been more aggressive in pursuing grants, and we are eligible to get many of them because of our low income status and our chronic underperformance. So this budget that these investments do include areas where we see grant money coming in, and Anthony built that in as part of this presentation.
Anybody else? Oh, Mr. Burks?
Are there any staff cuts or anything this budget?
The only cuts that we have are because of enrollment numbers declining, and so there will be cuts at certain schools. You'll see because enrollment declined at those schools, but we did not touch the. We were a little. We have pretty small class sizes around the district this year because we overfunded schools going into this year just because we thought their enrollment would be higher. So what you'll see is certain schools are dropping in enrollment, so they predictably they'll have fewer staff, and then vice versa. You'll see some schools whose enrollment is increasing, and they'll see an increase in staff. Overall, as a district, our enrollment is dropping a little bit, so we will have fewer staff, but not because we're increasing class sizes at all. It's just because our enrollment has dropped. So the same ratios that we've employed over the last 4 years are the same ratios that we've employed this year. We thought we were going to have to touch class size, but we were able to balance this budget without having to do that.
So then moving back to the mental health.
Yep.
More staff to appropriately serve students with social emotional needs such as how does that affect us and where?
So we build. Anthony always builds in staff. Contingency money in the budget, knowing that look, we could see an influx of high schoolers because of Paulo Ferrer. We could see, like you said, there could be every year we made adjustments because of student needs, enrollment spikes, and we've had to add teachers. So we do build in, Anthony builds in a contingency. He also knows that he needs a Steve Zweig contingency. Anytime, that a school is in need of extra resources, the resources have been there for us to make those adjustments mid-year when a school needs some of the supports you just talked about. So that's built in again, knowing that every year that happens.
Great.
And we hope to have good news, better news when we come back in June. Hopefully the state budget helps us more than what we anticipated here.
Yeah, I don't think that in June we'll know what's going on in conference committee. It's really July. The budget that we're going to propose will be based on the House's numbers for now. I'd hate to get aggressive and think that what the Senate is proposing is going to stick, and then have to, figure out what we're going to do. So what we're doing right now and what the city is also doing is they're basing their numbers on the House Ways and Means.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And we'll see you next month for the budget meeting.
Thanks, though.
June 19th, right? June 18th. At 5:30, right? 17th.
Yeah.
It was around there. June 17th. 5:30. As a matter of fact, I want you here at 5:15.
I have just two events I want to just mention, and then I'll turn it back over to you. Just this week, we have our new teacher or teacher signing day, which is happening on Thursday morning. We're celebrating high school seniors who are interested in the teaching profession, so we're organizing a teaching signing day for them on Thursday at 11 o'clock. And then we are tomorrow at 4. We are celebrating and honoring the students who are earned the seal of biliteracy. We have 10 students who met the requirements, took an assessment, and will be giving the first seal of biliteracy from the Holyoke Public Schools. And then tomorrow night is the Unified Track event for I believe for the region. Will be held at Holyoke High School. Volunteers are needed if you're interested at 3 o'clock, and then I think the events start kicking off. Is it 4 o'clock? Mr. Brooks, you know, 4 o'clock.
Yes, 4 o'clock at the high school.
4 o'clock at the high school, and it'd be great to be out there to support our young people from across the district. I'll stop there and turn it over to the vice chair.
Thank you. So that was. Oh, hold on. So you just gave us, in a nutshell, that.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into everything.
You're not going to go. Okay,
No.
Sounds great. So.
People can read through my notes.
Moving forward, any new business? Nope. Old business? Announcements. We're moving really quick. Mr. Collmore.
Just want to announce that Memorial Day will be up very next week, and we're all invited to attend the services at 10 o'clock at the War Memorial Building. So, a very, very nice ceremony on behalf of all the veterans of our city. So, try to get there because it's really important that we show our support to the veterans of Holyoke.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collmore. I know May 29th is Rising Star Ceremony, so please, that will start at 5:30 at the Holyoke High School Dean Campus and the cafeteria. So please let Liz know if you're going to be in attendance. Also, graduation for both campuses is June 2nd. Roberts Field, Holyoke High North, so as well. Please let Liz know if you will be able or be part of the graduation ceremony this year. I almost choked. Let me sip from my straw. Mr. Sheehan.
Yeah, I was going to mention graduation. We haven't gotten invites yet from Dr. Mahoney, so.
Yeah, he and I he just asked me today for the information, so I'll make sure you have all that.
And also the 29th, which is the Rising Stars event, I've been told is potentially another Charter and Rules Committee of the Holyoke City Council. So Dr. Zreik and I spoke about that today, and obviously he has to be at the Rising Stars event, so he won't be able to attend that, but we'll most likely be having someone coming out from the MSBA there. I would encourage many of you to go to the Rising Stars event and recognize our students. Depending on timing, I won't be at Rising Stars. I will go to the council meeting with that. But if time lets out, or depending on what time they meet, sometimes they meet at 6:30, so it'll all work out. But I would hope that you would go to the Rising Stars event.
The Rising Stars ceremony starts at 5:30, and I highly encourage the school committee members to please attend.
I can fill you in on Charter and Rules.
May 29th. Mm-hmm. And there's also 2 more meetings, ward meetings, and they're actually on the same day. We're knocking two birds with one stone. So at Ian White on May 23rd at 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Is the Ward 7 meeting. And then at the Lawrence School, also on May 23rd, is the, and that's at 5:30. June 4th will be at Kelly School at 5 o'clock. And again, we're just trying to reach out to the many different school sites and really get the community involved in talking about the middle school project and hear their concerns and kind of so they can have the opportunity to hear about the project. All right. Mr. Sheehan?
Is Mr. Kershane, the one at Ian White on Thursday, is that board meeting just going to be the topic of the school building, or is it multiple topics?
I think we're trying to do multiple topics,
Okay.
but we wanted to address that, but we just hadn't had another meeting as well, and
Yep.
there's a whole bunch of issues.
Yeah, I've
that
seen
we-
some.
Yeah, so we thought it's going to happen regardless. So I was like, all right, let's try to bring everyone together.
Okay.
Great. So there's no other old business announcements. So is there a motion to
moved.
adjourn? Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion, a meeting adjourned at 8:18. Thank you.